Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second edition of the Fulhamish Whiteboard with myself, Ben Jarman, and my co-host here, Dan Cooke. Dan, the last one went down an absolute storm with a lot of the fan base, so we must be pretty happy with that one, right?
What a duo we are, Jarms. It's an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, it was a great start, and we had some great interaction across all the social media channels. We had some great interaction in Telegram as well. We had quite a lot of emails with people wanting to get involved, and we've got a couple of the topics today from a couple of those emails and from various social channels. So for future episodes of the Whiteboard, if you do want to get involved, please feel free to hit us up on any of those social channels, on the Fulhamish email, in Telegram if you're in it. And me and Dan can obviously take a look at them and put them in a future Whiteboard episode. So today we've got two big topics at hand, but first topic I just want to quickly come get to is, Dan, that pink t-shirt. It looks to me like it could well be a cricketing t-shirt, but the team, I can't work out if it's Surrey or Middlesex. I think it's Middlesex, isn't it?
It is indeed Middlesex. Oh, wrong side. There we go.
Middlesex.
Flipped cameras. That's most of the time supporting Middlesex and Fulham can be quite depressing, but this season at least I've had Fulham to keep me cheery.
Yeah, I mean, we're sitting pretty at the top of the league here, aren't we? Slightly bottled it this weekend against Coventry. Not the best performance ever, but Coventry seemed to be that thorn in our side throughout this season. Obviously, the 7 goals conceded to the 2 scored. An aggregate of 7-2 is something you'd probably expect Fulham to be beating a team by, obviously, given our form this whole season. However, Coventry posed us a problem, and we're going to use this as our first topic for this evening's Whiteboard. So, I believe you have some tactical analysis you want to put in front of us.
Yeah, I think it was one of the things that I picked up on quite quickly on Sunday, and it was mentioned by Peter on the live podcast recording as well. And I think where we really struggle against Coventry is the nature of their pressing and the way that we really struggle to deal with it. So I picked an example. This is 2 minutes into the game, and I think it was the perfect example of just how we struggled throughout the whole match and where Coventry caused us so many problems. Yeah. So I just sort of highlighted here where we've got our 3 midfielders. We had Chalobah, Reid and Fabio Carvalho on Sunday playing in that midfield. And straight away, you can see when Tim Ream's on the ball here, how far apart our 3 in midfield are, which I think for me, I don't know what you think, Giles, but I think there are 2 ways, right, that you can beat a high press. And you've either got, you play through it, or you just avoid it completely and you go long and you play over the top of it.
Yeah.
And we've got a philosophy, which I personally like, of trying to play through it. But I think in order to do that, you have to have players in the right position. And one of those things is a tight midfield 3, creating these narrow, short triangles to beat this press. And if we roll it on here, I mean, Tim Ream gives this out to the only possible person he can, which is Anthony Robinson out on the left flank. And again, Fabio Carvalho makes that run forward. Harrison Reid is still seemingly playing at right wing back. And Nat Chalobah is stuck, as he was all get in that first half. And I don't think it was necessarily his fault, because he tried his best not to be, but he was just cut off completely by that front 3 of Coventry. And I think that's what they did all game. I think what they're very impressive at, and they deserve big credit for, is cutting those passing lanes. And you can see here that there are very few options available. And that's partially down to our poor positioning and partially down to their good positioning. And so what happens here is Anthony Robinson, again, he's only really got one option here, because you can't give that to Nat Chalobah there. He's being hounded. So he ends up being forced down the line to Neeskens Cabano. And it just keeps on happening that throughout this whole sequence, our midfield isn't accessible, and they are so far apart from each other that when players are on the ball, there isn't an obvious pass on, which means it leads to players holding onto the ball for too long. It leads to you getting pressed. It leads you to getting in trouble. And so it comes into Nat Chalobah there. Again, neither of his 2 midfielders are accessible, and he's forced back. And that basically happened all game. We were forced into positions where our midfielder were receiving the ball, and their only option was to go back, because otherwise they were going to lose it. And I guess it's important to say that we saw exactly the same thing when we played them away from home, which is you can see that Coventry front 3 there. They're cutting off those passing lanes. Harrison Reid, who was playing at the base that day, isn't accessible to Tim Ream. And we get situations like that farcical first goal we conceded, where You just end up with players so far away from each other that they hold onto the ball for too long, and then they eventually end up losing it.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to note is in that second slide on the second screen that you had there, where you had Harrison Reed. No, the one further on, just one further on. Yeah, here. I think there's one thing that's right and there's one thing that's wrong in this slide. You have Fab making that move out of the midfield three, and I like that because clearly they've been told to go man for man here. Obviously, there's three Coventry players in the centre of the park there, and Fabio's trying to bring one out to make more space for Chalobah. The thing that's completely wrong is why is Harrison Reed playing right wing back? And if Neco Williams is meant to be, or Neco Williams, however you want to say it, is meant to be that inverted fullback where he's meant to be coming inside, he's not doing it right. So the balance of that midfield is all off. And as you rightly say, it then leads to an avenue where Fulham can't make anything of it because they're crowded out. And I think Coventry, for the whole of this game, were excellent at shuffling Fulham back into the midfield, funneling back in away from danger areas. We said in the last whiteboard that Fulham love to have that overlapping midfielder. They love to get wide. They love to get out there quickly. Cov didn't let us do that the whole time, the full 90 there. And I think that's why they were so effective at cutting out everything that Fulham hate. Obviously, I think that on a bigger level, this really underlines that Marco Silva got the midfield pairings wrong twice against Coventry now. Josh Onoma and Harrison Reed for the first game, Harrison Reed and Nat Chalobah for the second. Chalobah, to me, is a little bit of an enigma. I can't work him out. I don't know what he does well, and I don't know what he does badly. And this is my issue with him. In so many of those frames there, his positioning doesn't move. And when he does get the ball, he's facing the wrong way. When you look at that in comparison to Jean-Michel Seri, who I think we're probably going to come and touch on in a minute, it's completely the opposite. Jean-Michel Seri likes to show for the ball. He's always got his body angles the right way. This is the thing that you're coached to do. Obviously, I'm no Premier League footballer. I never will be. Not fit enough for that. But what I was always coached to do is when you are receiving the ball, have it at an angle where your body is open to the next move, or you know what you're going to do in that next move. Everything. I always remember this Alan Shearer piece of analysis on MOTD when he was looking at Cesc Fabregas for Arsenal, checking his shoulder, check that shoulder. For me, like Chalobah doesn't do it that much, but Jean-Michel Seri does, and I think that's what sets the two of them apart. And I think that's why Seri should be that deeper lying six.
I agree, and I think scanning is just like it's such a fascinating thing. I really encourage people to go and have a look into some of the things that have been written about players scanning in terms of when they're looking away from the ball, when they're checking their surroundings, looking left, looking right. I think it's so important, especially when you're trying to beat a press, right? Because you need to know where those players are. And it's absolutely, I think it's something that Seri's brilliant at. And I really implore people hopefully when Seri gets back into the team, just to watch him, because I love watching him, his ability to pick up those pockets of space and then make sure that he's not dispossessed. I think that the perfect example is a game like this here when we played home to Swansea, and instantly you can see the difference in shape here.
Yeah.
Swansea, like Coventry, tried to press us high, admittedly in a slightly different way, with a slightly different system, but they are still pressing high. You can see that you've got four in that sort of diamond shape there, trying to crowd us out. But Seri instantly is picking up those little pockets. He's accessible there. And I think what's also important is then the two other midfielders in Harrison Reed and Bobby Reed are also accessible to him if he has the opportunity to get it to them. In this situation, when he receives it, instead he goes back and he plays it to Tosin. But what I think is fantastic is that it goes back to Tosin and then suddenly they are accessible again. Seri has picked up a pocket of space, as has Bobby Reed, in order to then help Tosin out. Here, he's got two options. He uses one of them and it ends out towards Tim Ream, who then gets it into Harrison Reed. Again, those triangles are nice and tight. You can play through a team in this situation. We get it out wide and suddenly Neeskens Skabano gets released. And I think this is where the really interesting thing comes, where you get those benefits, right, of playing out from the back, is that if you get it right, suddenly there's four Swansea midfielders who are completely out of the game and they are completely exposed. We're in behind them, which I think is exactly where we've got it right a lot of times this season, but we just don't seem to get it right against Coventry. And I think that might be a mix of one, team selection, but also two, just not handling well a team that just sits a number 10 on our holding midfielder.
Agree. I think that this is a trademark of all the teams that have gotten positive results out of Fulham this season, is they have that 10 or 8 that comes to sit on the 6. And they also have a tendency to keep one of two strikers high on those centre halves. And that, again, was one of the trademarks from Coventry's win this season. Again, like, one thing, I'm also a big fan of us playing out from the back here. I think that when you do it, it can take away 2 or 3 lines of the opposition really easily in a couple of passes, in anywhere from like 2 or 3 seconds to anywhere for up to 10 seconds. You can get around half a team.
Yeah.
Even the teams that are really well organised, you can get through them with a couple of really well placed and nicely timed passes. And if you get the flicks off, and a lot of people will complain about players that flick the ball on or try and play the ball around the corner. And when it's frustrating is that when it doesn't come off. However, when it does come off, it's devastating. And that's why they do it. And that's what happens in the Premier League. And that's why their transitions are so much faster than any other league in the world, because they're based on that. And whilst we haven't got time to go too deeply into playing out the back now, we have had a couple of questions, one notably from Richard Smith, who emailed us in a couple of weeks ago about the press, saying that Gentleman Jim doesn't like it. However, he's a fan. Could we have a look into this? We are going to on the next whiteboard. So that is going to be one of the 2 topics there. But whilst we don't have time for it today, we do have time for one more topic that we wanted to give to you guys, which is going to be around what we're going to look like next year. And obviously, we're both hoping, we're definitely in the WEN club. We have been since January the 26th, 2021, if I remember the date correctly. That wonderful Bristol City podcast where both of us were incredibly hungover. And it was just vibes and no analysis.
Hangover vibes. It was brilliant.
And we just wanted to have a quick explore about, what both our opinions are going to be on where we think we're going to be next year, what we're going to line up like, any tactical changes that Marco might bring into the Premier League, and why.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting discussion because it's something that started to crop up more and more. And I remember being asked on a podcast a couple of weeks back about a listener sent in a question about, should we start playing a system that we think we're going to play in the Premier League? And while I think the answer for that is probably no while you're in the Championship, I think it's definitely worth having the discussion because it's really interesting to see where we're going to go with this. Because I think we all know that we're not going to walk into the Prem, hit 60-65% possession in every game and walk through teams like we have this season. We'll do it in some games, but I don't think you can play necessarily that same system and expect the same results in the Premier League. As we spoke about on the last whiteboard, there are moments when we've been exposed in the Championship and have managed to get away with it because of the inferior quality. But as soon as you make that step up, teams just kill you. The quality in the Premier League is ridiculous. So I think where I'd like to start with it is basically what our shape has sort of been like this season. And I think it's interesting because I don't think it's actually always been like this. And what I actually think we will look like is something that we have used a few times this season, especially more so, I think, at times when Bobby Reid came in for Fabio Carvalho while he was out injured. And basically, I think that shape is just a little rotation where that 10 drops in and plays a little bit deeper, and your 8 just becomes a little bit more advanced with that 6 sitting at the base. Something I think if people want to think about it in a Fulham-based terms, I think this is very much how we played in that Slav season, where you have Kevin McDonald sitting at the base, you have Stefan Johansson hitting every blade of grass in the park, and you have Tom Cairney pulling the strings in that sort of final third area. So I think that, where I see the key things in this midfield, I find midfield's fascinating. I love a midfield 3 is my favorite thing in football, and it's something I hated last season was seeing us play with the 2 in midfield because I just don't like it. So I think the key aspects here, as you look at the 6 here, and it's something we spoke about, is being accessible. Your centre backs being able to pick out your number 6 while you're in possession, but also likewise just that shuttling, really sort of laterally and longitudinally along the pitch is hitting those areas when you're out of possession and making sure that that number 6 is protecting your back 4, which I think is where we get an interesting discussion about who that player is, because I don't know if we have someone who does both of those things. Next, the number 8, which I think this for me is a really key area that I would love to see us make a great signing in, a genuine box-to-box midfielder who, whereas I think we have players who can play between both areas, I don't think we have someone who is both very effective off the ball, but also a goal threat going forward. I think that's so important from your number 8. We saw it from Stefan Johansson in the Championship, how many goals he was managed to get playing that role, and how useful it is just having a player in that position who can come up with a goal. Those sort of late runs into the box, affecting the game in the penalty area, is really important. And then finally, you've got that number 10 who's sitting a little bit deeper, an 8/10, if you like, who I think that's where, that's the channels that you're wanting to get them into, in and around, as Farrell, I think, once called it, the love handles of the penalty box, which is my favorite phrase. If you can get your number 10 into those areas, trying to get the ball out wide or get into space to shoot from outside the area, I think that's the sort of the balance of a midfield that I think I would like to see next season. I think it's just one of those. It's always such a nice balanced midfield to me. And if you can get the right players in those roles, I think you've just got a good system there, and a team that is used to playing nice, attractive football, keeping it on the floor, looking to play through teams. I imagine that might be where we'll go. But I think you had a flip side to that as to where you think we might go in a different direction.
Yeah, I thought we might go in a little bit of a different direction here. And to be honest, it is kind of painful for me to walk through this formation because I, like you, am a massive advocate of having a 3 in midfield. And my favourite ever teams in my football watching life/career have always had a midfield 3 that operate offensively and defensively, of course. But that being said, given how often Fulham are caught out on the transition this year, and how transitionally based the Premier League is, and how much of it is dictated by pure athleticism and speed, I think that there could be a chance that Fulham and Silva revert to a back 5. Mainly because I think Fulham will get found out pretty quickly if they leave 2 exposed centre halves in the 6. The way to counter that, obviously, as we saw with Scott Parker last season, was that he put an extra centre half in, and it did cull the tide of goals. But one thing that we didn't see was that in the offensive zones, there wasn't any outlet. There was normally one almost full striker in the shape of Ivan Cavallero and one supporting player who was, for the most part, Ruben Loftus-Cheek, who may as well have been a ghost. I think the main thing about this formation is that it allows the team to retract and then open quite fluidly. And also, when you look at the movement of these players here, the fullbacks coming up the pitch, as with the dotted lines there, expertly done, provide some great outlets for balls. And we've seen a trend across European football at the moment where 5 at the back with wing backs is very much in, and it's very dangerous. Some of the top teams have reverted to that 5 at the back. I dread to mention them, but Chelsea obviously won the Champions League last year with a formation very similar to this. One thing that also I think that Fulham negated to do when they were playing a 5 at the back under Parker was have 2 wingers where they focused on raw speed, and also where they came inside and provided support for that striker. And that's what I think may happen here. So with this little switch of the system here, you can see that winger comes in behind the number 9, and the other winger comes in more narrow to make a 2. And that's where I think that Fulham are rumoured to be signing Manor Solomon at the moment. And I think this is where, with perhaps a sort of, if I was Marco Silva, perhaps with this sort of change in mind, where he can drift inside and almost like a Pedro Neto or a Daniel Podent for Wolves, just have that ability to get in and around that striker and oppose an issue in the love handles of the box. And obviously, when you have 2 capable wing backs, obviously you have Kenny Teta, who's used to playing wing back for Lyon and also with Ajax. And if we made Neco Williams a permanent move over the summer, I think it reduces a lot of the defensive frailties that we may see from him at Premier League level, and also allows us to have someone protecting him from the back. It also means we don't have to break the bank to go out to get a huge box-to-box midfielder, which is the most coveted position in Europe. And I think it obviously, on the pitch, a lot of security and a lot of options. And if you, as much as I don't want to mention another rival of ours, Brentford, they did basically understand that they were going to get transitioned on a lot. and plugged that gap and almost came out and said, first year, everything we want to be is out the window. Let's survive, then build. And I think that that's not a bad option to have for next year, because as much as we may want to think that Fulham's midfield can probably cope with it now, chances are they won't be. And I also think that we saw it with Wolves when they came up too. They got a little more defensive and they cemented themselves. Now they're starting to grow again. And, for me, there's no reason why Fulham can't do the same.
Yeah, I think two things I'd like to say about this as well. I think one of the things that people sometimes, I guess, neglect to realise with a 5 at the back formation, a 3/5, whatever you want to call it, is that it's not stationary, right? It's not static. You've got fluidity in football, and often teams have a shape in possession and a shape out of possession. And I think what's really important in this situation here, in this shape, is that you can create those overloads in areas. You can outnumber your teams in dangerous areas. You can get players into key spaces like you've got your trio here, where you can actually pose a threat. And whilst, if I go back, whilst there, that looks initially a bit sort of placid and you look like you're not going to cause teams many problems. As soon as you get your players into shape when they're in possession, you can actually then start to cause real issues up the pitch, unlike what we were like last season, which it very much sort of just stayed like that. And I think secondly, the only thing I'd like to ask you, Jarms, is that if we're going to look like this, does that mean you don't think we need a replacement for Fabio? Because if I look at this team, to be honest, I don't see a natural role for him in here anyway, other than potentially on that left wing if it's going to tuck in behind the two.
Yeah, the idea is that if Fabio did stay, he'd be that drift-in winger, almost like the Philippe Coutinho used to be for Liverpool in that formation. I think that there will be a clamouring to replace Fabio because it makes sense to go 1-for-1. However, I can't see that we would get someone of that quality in, given our budget and given what needs to be done with the rest of the squad. Also, with that formation too, very well noted, England played it when we got all the way to the European finals, and also Spurs play it now under Conte, and they are two of the best teams in the world, internationally and domestically. However, they've shown how dangerous it can be. Yeah. And also, when you have that 3 at the back formation, like Kyle Walker and like Ben Davies, one of those centre halves can also be someone that played winger or wing back, or centre half.
Yeah,
which is why if we'd kept Dennis Adoy, that formation would have been brilliant. However, we haven't, so we'd have to go out and potentially look at having someone in there of that ilk. I just think it gives us a little more solidity. It goes against all my football morals and fibres. However, I do think that in the case of survival next year, then it could be something to look at just for a short-term fix, really.
Yeah, I also think that we may well see both. I think that I've been impressed. If we axe Coventry from this conversation, I've been impressed how we have not played exactly the same way in every game. And there have been games when Marco has 100% understood how the opposition are going to line up. And he's made us play in a different way. And it's not necessarily a different shape, but just different thought process about how we go about our play. Yeah. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we picked and chose which games to play, which of those formations, because I think both of them offer value. If we're going to go out and we're playing, I don't know, if a team like Burnley, for example, whether they stay up or not, I wouldn't be surprised to see us go out, play 4-3-3, dominate possession and try and stick to what we've seen this season in a way. Whereas in those games where you feel like you're going to be on the back foot a little bit more, or you're concerned about the intensity and the quality of the opposition pressing, then we might see the 5/3.
Agree. Wholly agree. I think next year is going to be about being as flexible as possible. It's also, for me, going to be about being as quick as possible on the pitch as well, because Fulham traditionally don't have a very fast team. And Premier League is all about pace, and it's all about being transitionally quick now. So it's going to be an interesting summer ahead. And obviously, we'll cover all of it on the whiteboard as well. So, as we said, we're coming to a close on this episode, 25 minutes in. We wanted to make this one slightly shorter than the last one, just so we didn't overload you all, really, with loads of information and tactics and attitude, just having the time of our lives, really. But if you do, as we said at the start, if you do want to have one of your subjects reviewed on the whiteboard, me and Dan will be doing this fairly regularly now, hopefully every 2 or 3 weeks or so. Then please do get all of your questions in to us via Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, any platform possible that you have available at your fingertips. Please do just send them in, and me and Dan will take them, and we'll try our best to cover them all across this coming summer. It's going to be a big one for Fulham. It's going to be a big one for us, isn't it, Dan?
Absolutely. And it's exciting. It's really, really exciting. I've got such optimism going forward. So it's going to be a pleasure to talk about, I think.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be a massive summer. Looking forward to getting stuck into it with my mate, Dan. So fingers crossed, yeah. And hopefully by the next time we do a whiteboard, we will be champions. So instead of the usual Fulhamish outro music you get, we can play We Are the Champions by Queen and get copyright strike by YouTube. So all good in the hood. But Dan, I want to say thanks again. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for putting all that wizardry together on the PowerPoint slides. It was absolutely top notch.
Always a pleasure being with you, Jarms.
Nice one, mate. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll catch you all soon. Cheers.